some of this stuff is very important for you guys to know. Remember that you are the biggest part of that IEP team. Try to have a cooperative approach. Okay, that is very important. The whole philosophy that you catch more flies with honey is my philosophy on going and working with the school. If you walk in automatically with a negative attitude, we're not going to get very far. The school's going to feel like you're against them. You're going to feel like the school's against you. And that rarely is the case. Most of the time when I get called in, it's because we've already gotten to a point where tempers have boiled over, and I need to go in and basically listen to both sides, because most of the time it's lack of communication on both sides, or miscommunication on both sides. And so we have to go in and cooperate and try to figure out what this side's saying, and how can we work together. So what do you do before an IEP meeting? You have to get prepared. My wife and I used to call this pre-gaming. The night before, we would sit down with a legal pad and we would start making a list of things. So you ask for a copy of the IEP draft a week in advance, if possible. Now, I will say this, with the new Ed plan, for those of you who are familiar with Ed plan, that's the new state program that helps them write the IEPs. This is so hard to do. They can come up with a little bit of a draft, but it also is going to depend on if they've got all the testing done ahead of time too. And sometimes they're waiting on tests to come in from outside sources. So, but you can always request a draft of the IEP. Ask for a copy of all draft documents. That includes testing, anything to show progress or where they are at with their peers. Make all your requests in writing. Okay, one of the most important things I'm going to say today, and I'm going to say this probably several times, if it's not in writing, it never happened. Always request everything in writing. If you talk to a teacher and they say that they're going to do something, or you talk to the special ed director or whoever and they say that they're going to do something, as soon as you walk out, I would get on my phone and I would text or email them and say, per our conversation, you said that this and this and this was going to happen. Is that my understanding? That does two things. Number one, it has a paper trail. You can always go back and say, well, here's what you said. The second part is it opens up a conversation, communication between me and the school, because they can come back and say, oh, yes, that's exactly what we were going to do. I think that's a great idea. Or, no, that's not exactly what I meant. Here's what I was really trying to say. So request things in writing. Make notes of task skills your child has mastered. Make sure that the school knows that, make sure that your school knows what your child can do. So many times we look at what the child can't do that we forget about the things that they can do. We as parents are guilty of that as well, but the school especially, because the school only hears what, either you tell them or what a teacher tells them, but the special education teacher may not know exactly all of their skills. Review records and reports from the school. Make sure you look over those. If you don't understand them, find somebody that can, an advocate. Maybe sit down with the teacher and say, okay, I don't really understand this. What does this mean? Visit your child's class and observe other behaviors. Listen, I've had this one on here for years. This one's tough to do. A lot of schools won't let you in, especially right now during the COVID days. So that's okay if you can't get in. If you can visit your class, your child's class, that's great. But collect any current medical information. Look, so many times the school doesn't even know that your child has medical issues. It's important for them to know that information. So if you have any of that, make sure that you make copies and you get it to the school. All right. Collect information on your child's specific disability, especially if you have something that's rare or unusual. Teachers probably haven't heard of some of those. I know that my son has autism. That's pretty common, especially nowadays. But here's what I've learned. Every day, we're learning more and more about autism. So if you learn something or you find something new about your child's specific disability that you think's important, give it to the teacher, because that teacher is probably not trying to do their research on autism every day, or on diabetes, or on whatever the case may be.
Hey, Kodey.
Yes.
You have a question in the chat from Robert and Kristen Larmy.
Okay, let me see here. My child is developmentally delayed. He attends a special education class for 3 to 5-year-olds who receives speech and occupational from an outside agency, but does not qualify for them through the school. Do you know why he would qualify with one place but not with the other? Okay. So I'm going to tell you what the school will tell you, and then I'm going to kind of go into that a little bit. The school is looking at anything that would help him or hinder him from education. Okay. So let's say, and I just dealt with this in an IEP yesterday morning. So I kind of got an idea on this one. We had a child that was not going to qualify for OT services because it had to do with, what did it have to do with? His fine motor skills. But they said that did not hinder him from doing his classwork. Okay. If that makes any sense to you. So they were not going to qualify him for the services based on classwork or schoolwork, things relating to his education. That one gets a little tricky, and I would have you talk to an advocate, and I could probably explain this a little bit better outside of this, but just know that a lot of things the school doesn't believe are part of his educational needs really can be seen as that if you break it down for them. Okay. Because even though I'm going to give you physical therapy for an example. Okay. If a child can't, let's say, doesn't walk properly, that may not hinder his ability to learn in a classroom. But if he can't walk up and down the hall like the rest of his peers, then it is hindering part of his education experience, if that makes any sense to you at all. So that's why he would qualify with an outside service, but not with the school. I hope I answered that for you. And then it says we have several clients that the school will only let them go to school for 1 hour up to half a day with others. How do they meet fate by doing this? They don't. I mean, that's the simple answer. They don't. I'll try to get into that one real quick. So what you want to do is go out to the State Department's website, and there is a letter of shortened days. And I may see if we can find that and put it on here. But what the State Department and the federal government has said is that if you shorten a person's days, you are basically that's called change of placement, and that is against least restrictive environment. And by doing that, you are denying a person FAPE. Okay. The only way around that is if the parent agrees to that, that being in a regular classroom is not where the child needs to be, that he needs to be at home. I'm going to give my information at the end of this, and you can contact me and I'll tell you what you need to do. What if they did it because they felt forced? You need to get an advocate. That's my short answer. Okay, there's lots of stuff coming in. Let's hold the questions for a little bit, okay? I'm going to get through some of this because I've only got a little bit of time. Let's get through some of this, and then I'll come back to the questions, I promise, okay? Talk to your child about their interests, their likes and dislikes. Know what the component of the IEP includes, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Make notes about the services that you want to discuss. What does your child need? This kind of goes back to what they were talking about earlier. Why do they need the occupational therapy? And don't just go into for educational services. explain to, if my child doesn't have the occupational therapy, then he's or let's say the physical therapy, because that's what I went into earlier, he's not going to have the same experience in school that his peers are. Okay, so you need to explain to them in a rational way. Read all invitations and other materials. If something comes to you, please read over that. I've seen so many times that the school says, well, we tried to contact the school so many times, and a parent so many times, and no response. That's because something came in the mail and it wasn't opened. So make sure that you read everything. Sign and return the invitation. That's very important. Let them know that you know what's going on. And if you don't, contact them and ask them questions. Arrive on time. That's very important. That's just respectful. Take someone with you to the IEP to take notes if you have to. Just to sit there. Bring a copy of a previous IEP. You don't want the same IEP that you had before. You should be reaching goal, or your child should be reaching goals. And if they just hand you the same thing that they handed you the year before, they're not doing their job. Share your notes, ideas, and information. Again, they don't know what you need or what your child's capable of if you don't let them know. Bring a copy of articles that may be relevant. Again, we kind of talked about that earlier. Ask questions when you don't understand. Listen, I was a journalist years ago, and one of my editors gave me the best piece of advice I'll never forget. He said, if you have a question, chances are somebody else does, so ask it. You're never going to know the answer if you don't ask. Asking questions, don't worry about whether or not you think they're dumb questions. If you don't understand it, you have to ask, okay? Be polite but assertive. Always, again, be as nice as possible, but you want to make sure that they understand that you are serious and that you are there for what's best for your child. So let them know that. Listen to those who disagree. Okay, if the school says, hey, we can't do that, my best question to them is why? They can disagree with you. You may not think that what they have to say is relevant, or that your child will even do the things that they're saying that they're going to do with them. Ask them why and listen to them. A lot of these schools and a lot of these teachers have been doing this for a long time. They probably have some ideas that you've not even thought about before. So just keep an open mind. Make your points clearly. If they don't seem to understand what you're saying or what you're asking for, step back, think about what you're asking, and see if you can ask it in a different way. And again, this goes back to what I was talking about. If you disagree, ask that they included on the IEP under parent concerns. And we'll talk about PLOP here in just a second, okay? If you think you hear no, ask for options. If they say, we can't do that, say, okay, what can you do? If you can't give me, if you can't allow my child to maybe walk down the hall to relieve stress, what can you do to try to help him once he's frustrated? Ask these questions. Always ask why. Be realistic about your child's abilities. Okay. I use this as an example. I had a mentor who said, well, we had a child that we went in to try to help, and on the IEP, it said that he was going to tie his shoes. That was a goal, was to tie his shoes. And as I started looking at that, it was the goal for the last 3 years. And for 3 years, he's not been able to reach that goal. The kid was 14 years old at the time. And my question, and I'm talking as the advocate, he said, my question was, can he use Velcro or slip-on shoes? How important is this? Because he's not going to get the shoe tying thing down, and it's not important to his life or his education. So why is it still on there? Be realistic about abilities, okay? Voice your opinion in a constructive way. Again, more flies with honey. Be sure you receive a copy of the final agreed upon IEP. They can email those now. As soon as they're done, they can send an email, or you can have them print them out. But you are entitled to a copy. So what are some important components of the IEP? Well, we have the present levels of performance, or you may hear them say plot, but they're present levels. So where are they with their peers? These have to be measurable annual goals and objectives that are put into, based on the present levels of performance. They will have measurable annual goals. Okay, and you guys have seen those before. Related services, delivery hours. They have to tell how many hours of services, whether that be speech, occupational therapy, how many hours of the day are they going to pull them out of a regular classroom. That's always on there. Testing and classroom accommodations. These are pretty important. So especially if they're doing state testing, anything that has to do with state testing has to be on the IEP if it's going to be an accommodation, or else they can't do it when the testing comes around. Transition plan, again, when they're 16 years or older, or by 8th grade, whichever comes first, they have to start working on a transition plan. What's going to happen once they graduate? Extended school year, or ESY, you may hear. That means that if your child at any point that the school is out of session may regress, then they have to provide you extended school year, or ESY services. So for instance, if my child during the most popular one obviously is the summer break, but during the summer break, if my son is going to regress with his occupational therapy, then they have to provide occupational therapy through the summer. What some people don't realize is that can also be Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, if everybody agrees that that's necessary, which, a week or 2 weeks is not always necessary, but sometimes it is. So just talk to the school about that. Placement. We already talked about least restrictive environment. Where's the child best going to receive their education? We talked about they have to have student strengths, unique needs of the child. What are some things that child is going to need to best learn? And that could be those services, that could be accommodations, that could be modifications. How does the student's disability affect the involvement or progress in general education curriculum? Is that a behavior thing? Is that he can't hold his pencil correctly? Is it, there are a lot of different things that could affect that person learning, their ability to learn. Debbie says, example of extended school year was my son received speech therapy over the summer. That's a pretty common one. Occupational therapy, speech therapy over the summer is pretty normal, but yes, you're right. Parents' concerns, this is where you add any and all of your concerns and really let them know, unload your concerns to them. Any discussion that takes place during the meeting should be noted in the present levels of performance. All right, so transitions. That means from any time that they change from one, usually it's building, if you think about it. So early intervention to preschool. So anything from 3 years, up to 3 years, and then into preschool. Elementary school to middle school is a transition. Middle school to high school. However, the transition plan refers to federally mandated. The transition plan is basically anything 16 years and up. And we've talked about that already. Planning is mandated to begin no later than the first IEP honor before a student turns 16. Yes. Student must be involved in making these plans if at all possible. We talked about that at the beginning. So do the goals address the needs that are identified in the present levels of performance? So we talk about SMART goals, and you guys have probably heard of this before, but SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, result-oriented, and time-bound. So specific means that they're based on the needs, both academically and functionally. And I want to point that out. So that kind of goes back to what the question was earlier. Are their needs academic and functional? And so this is where you can go back to the school and you can ask them, well, if he doesn't qualify, are they functional? And that's in IDEA. And like I said, an advocate can help you find the information on that. Measurable means progress is objectively determined as at frequent defined data points. So how are we going to measure these goals? If I have a child that is going to, I think of behavior goals on this one. So my child will raise his hand 4 out of 5 times to ask a question. Okay, that's measurable. What's not measurable is my child will behaving in the classroom as determined by the teacher. That's not measurable. How are you going to measure that? I also like looking at these goals, and I see behavior goals. They say that they're going to do a behavior 100% of the time. That's unrealistic. How many kids actually follow the rules 100% of the time? Very, very rare does that happen. So keep that in mind. Are they achievable? Are they realistic? Can my son really tie a shoe? And I kind of gave you that example earlier. And is it important if he does or not? Result oriented with standard outcomes in mind. Again, is it measurable? And those outcomes, are we going to be able to see that later on? And then time bound. Usually we use a year. In fact, yesterday, the same IEP, they were talking about a speech goal that was, they wanted to reach something by September the 22nd. And I thought, that's today. How are they going to do that? They were talking a year in advance. So they usually do those within a year. Okay. This is where we talk to our parents and we say, look, think to yourself, what are your hopes for your child? What do you want? What kind of goal do you have, personal goal for your child? Then what are your fears for them? Do you want your child to have their best life possible? Most independent life that they can have, right? What are your fears for them? That they're going to get hurt, that they're going to be bullied, that they're going to, there are a lot of different fears, especially for a child with a disability, right? And then the last thing is, are you advocating from your hopes or your fears? Are you trying to prevent them from getting hurt? Or are you advocating so that they can have the best, most independent life possible? Always keep that in mind. All right, I'm going to kind of skip through a little. I know you guys have some questions. I'm going to skip through the measuring goals because I do want to point out this, though. I like this little thing under here that says, for a fair selection, everyone has to make the same, take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And that's where we can get into fair versus equal and equality. And I'm not going to go too deep into that, but measuring goals, you can do that with tests, with daily work samples, a portfolio if you have to, benchmark tests. Again, I'm kind of skipping through this fast, and I apologize for that, but I think there's some more important stuff. And then statewide assessment information, objective evaluations from the parent, from the teacher. How will you know? How will you know if your child is doing well on each goal? You should have an open line of communication between the school, between the teacher and yourself. We used to do these communication notebooks. We still do them. And if anybody's interested, Oklahoma Family Network, and we can do these. But one of the most important things is just texting nowadays or email. An open line of communication between you and the teacher is the biggest thing. Report cards are very important. Nowadays, most schools, you can look at the report cards online. So you should know how they're doing academically, at least. And they should send home progress reports as frequently as their peers, their typical learning children. Okay. And as we said, write in a communication notebook. You can actually write that into the IEP. Hey, I want this to be an open line. I want every day for you to, or every week, send home where they are on their goals. What have they done well this week? Related services. That's assistive technology. Now, assistive technology, a lot of people think are iPads or computers or things like that. That can be anything from that to just a grip on a pencil that helps them grab better because they have fine motor skill issues. Audiology, if they have some issues with hearing. Counseling services can be related services. Occupational therapy, physical therapy, psychological services, speech language therapy. Those are all related services. So you can ask for any of those. If you can ask for an evaluation, let me rewind that and say you can ask for an evaluation for those. And then the school and you determine whether or not they qualify. I will say this before I move on very much further. If they do an evaluation, so let's say to the person that asked if they didn't qualify through the school, you can always get an outside evaluation and take it back to the school and compare it. And if you both don't agree, even though you have something from an outside evaluator saying that they do qualify, you can always go through, and this is a little bit harder, but if it comes down to it, you can go through a due process and try to see if you can get that from the State Department, you know. So, all right, we talked about least restrictive environment. I'm gonna skip over this a little bit because we kind of already have gone over that. I do want to go through accommodations a little bit though. Accommodations are changes that make it easier for your child to learn. They don't change what your child is learning, they change how your child is learning. So some examples of this. Let me see here. Presentation, a change in the way instruction and information are presented. So example, letting a child listen to an audiobook instead of reading a text, okay? That can be for comprehension. Now, if it's reading, if they want to learn how much that the child can actually read, that's not ideal. But if they want to read, if they want to know how much the child actually comprehends, audiobooks can be used. That can be used for other subjects too, though. Response, changing the way the child completes assignments or tests. For example, allowing a child to give spoken answers. This is a good one for spelling. I know some kids have issues with writing. They have a block with how they write their words, but they can spell the words orally. If they can give you that cat is spelled C-A-T orally, but they can't do it by writing it down, they still know how to spell the word. It doesn't matter how they give it to you. Change in setting. If the child needs to go into a smaller group, or my son has severe ADHD, so we allow him to go into another classroom to take tests sometimes if he has to. So that way he has less distractions. Timing and schedule. If we need extended time, we need breaks when testing, those things can be provided. Those are accommodations. Now, modifications are a little bit different. That's a change in what's taught to or expected from your student. In some cases, a skill that would normally be taught as a certain grade level is changed, eliminated, or postponed. So that's basically given, you know, if you only work on a first grade level and you're in the fourth grade, we give you first grade work and until we try to build up to that fourth grade level. So some teachers use pass and not pass instead of letter grades. Practice test, that's a good modification. Sometimes instead of doing 20 questions, we only do 5. If I can prove to you that I understand and can do the work in 5, why do I have to do 20 when it takes me a lot longer than everybody else? So that's a modification, right? Teacher might use more prompting and cueing to help the student determine the right answers. So, or eliminate certain answers, you know. Give them 2 multiple choice instead of 4. Shorten class assignments, less homework. Those are pretty important things. All right. Let's see here. You'll meet annually to update your child's IEP. We already talked about that. You can update or make changes to the IEP at any time, and you just need to request a meeting. We've already gone through this, so I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to go through this, and then I think we're going to go to questions because it looks like we're getting quite a few questions here. Again, I apologize. I know I'm going through this fast, but I've only got a little bit of time to do a whole lot here. So your responsibility is to get your child to school on time, look at your child's schoolwork daily. You have to help them. And I'll back up even a little bit on this. When we went into speech therapy or occupational therapy with Connor, my son, before we left, I would always say, okay, what did you work on today? What are some things that we can do at home? Because if you're only getting speech therapy or occupational therapy 30 minutes to an hour once or twice a week, how much is he actually going to get? You have to be the extension of that. When you get home, you have to continue the work that the therapist was doing. Okay? That is part of your responsibility as a parent. Be sure your child's eating and sleeping well. That's not always easy for some of us, huh? Volunteer to help out at school. That's not easy anymore either. Monitor progress of IEP goals and objectives. That's important. Where are they at with the goals? Are they reaching those goals? If not, we need to hold another meeting and find out why. Schedule conference with various educators if necessary. School parent-teacher conferences are always important. So, and it says always stay involved in your child's education. I think that's where, we are at the end actually. So never be afraid to ask questions. I'm going to put my information up here. You guys can contact me, but let's go into some of these questions. Again, I don't know that I have all the answers. I think we left off with C. Matthews here. My son has an IEP. He's only 8. We were having a lot of aggression and Head Start, so we got him a service dog. Trainer came to the school and worked with the dog and para before he started school. School agreed that the para can help him since he was so young. We have been doing this for 3 years. Got a call this week, and they're telling me that he has to be responsible for his dog all the time. No help, or she cannot come to school. Is there anything I can do to help with keeping the dog with him since this is what he is wanting? I haven't had a whole lot of experience with service dogs as far as the laws. What I would recommend is probably call the State Department and ask them. They've probably got somebody that can help you through that. I don't see if it's written into the IEP, and I don't know if it is or not, but if it is, I don't know why they wouldn't allow him in. So I would contact the State Department on that if they're pushing back on that at all, or an advocate. You could call Oklahoma Parent Center. I bet they would know better too. I just haven't dealt with that myself. So report cards are a sore point. Last year, kindergarten, because he was unable to do the work at the same pace and he was not well defined. In IEP, he was given Fs in all subjects because not all work was completed. Okay, so how can a child with learning disabilities get Fs? I would say is virtual students. So, okay, so this is kind of a tricky subject because I'm not going to say people with a disability can't fail. Because they can. I mean, if you're not doing the work, that's different altogether, but that doesn't sound like what the situation is. However, I would probably ask, can we lessen the work? Can we make a modification to his work so that he doesn't have as much to do? Again, can I prove that my son or my daughter is can do the work in less amount of work? Is that making any sense to anybody? As long as they can prove to me that they can spell that word, I don't care how they spell it to me. I hope that makes sense. That doesn't mean, listen, so many times I've had parents though that say, well, he got an F, but he didn't turn in any of his work. Look, if you don't do the work, you can get an F. But if you're doing the work and you're trying, you should be given credit for what you do. And I think that's what you're saying here, Debbie. I hope that is what we're talking about. And then see, Matthew says, yes, it's in the IEP. If it's in the IEP, it's going to be hard for them to say, hey, he can't have that. So again, I'd probably get an advocate. That's something, if you want me to, I can do a little research, or Oklahoma Parent Center, like I said, probably has a little more experience in that, I think. I thought we had more questions. Oh, there's a new one. I understand we did address a better IEP this year. Okay, good, Debbie. So do you feel like you're getting more of what you were looking for than with the new IEP? And I'm going to leave that open, see if she types that in. If you guys want to ask questions and unmute, you guys can go ahead and do that. I think you guys can unmute. Okay, Laura says, so in my case, they were shortened school days because of child behavior. Look, I'm going to say this, and this is going to get, there's more to this than just what I'm going to say. If a child has a disability and the behavior is part of their disability, they can't just kick the kid out of school. They have to address the disability because it is impeding their ability to learn, which is a violation of FAPE. Okay. So I get this call all the time. They're calling me to come pick up my son every day. No. Have they done a functional behavior analysis? Have they done a behavior intervention plan? Have they done anything to keep the child in the school as opposed to just having you come pick them up? Second part of that is, are they injuring themselves or others? Have they had any alcohol or drugs at school? Do they have a weapon? Those three things are pretty important. And if you can answer no to those things, then sending them home all the time because of behavior is not. Have them contact the State Department. The State Department has a person on contract that will come in, a behavior specialist, and they will work with them on doing a functional behavior analysis. If they don't want to do it in-house, let me say that, doing a functional behavior analysis and a behavior intervention plan. But they have to do those things ahead of time. Does the parent have to take them home half day if the school is saying they can't have them there all day? I would hold a meeting again, and I would take an advocate with you, and I would say, look, you can't, if it's a behavior issue, what are you doing to help him with his behaviors? Again, is he causing severe physical harm to himself or others? And that's the big one. The other ones usually don't happen.
Kodey?
Yes.
This is my name is Laura.
Yeah.
This one is a 7-year-old girl, and she got up on a counter and jumped off the counter.
Okay.
And so it's those kinds of behaviors that she was doing, and they said they can't keep her safe, so they have to send her home.
Okay. They need to find out how to keep her safe. She's doing those things for a reason, and they need to figure out why she's doing those. So that's where the functional behavior analysis comes in. That will determine what is the antecedent. Why are we having these behaviors? Erica Giles says ask for a manifestation meeting if they're being kicked out for behaviors. If it constantly, that is true. Manifestation determination is kind of what I was going into there, without giving you all the big words. But manifestation determination is basically if the child's disability is causing the behaviors and they miss more than 10 days, I believe. I'd have to go back and look at that. I should know that off the top of my head, but I went blank. Then and they're being kicked out for that behavior, then they have to do what's called manifestation determination, determine whether or not that's something that would cause change of placement. So, okay. That brings us right up to a minute, right?
Yes. Okay. I have a question. So there is a little girl in our community who has autism, and her mom works 45 minutes away. They get called every day to come pick her up because of her behavior. She's pre-K autism. She is being provoked to have bad behavior. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like they are doing things that stress her to the point where she is biting or hitting.
Yes.
How can I direct the mom to know her rights and to say, hey, you have to make the situation for my child safer or better?
I'd say at this point, you need to get an advocate to help. Again, Oklahoma Parent Center or they can contact me if they want to. I'll probably refer to the Parent Center depending on where they're at. But you definitely need somebody now to step in, because I've been there. Connor had a teacher that every day she was doing little things to get him to react so that she could send him out of the classroom every day.
That is exactly what is happening to this little girl. And the mom has no idea. It's her first year of school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say it's time to probably bring in an advocate. They're going to know where the laws are and what they need to do to make that stop. So.
Okay. Thank you so much. And you have one more question in the
Yes.
chat that just popped up.
Robert, where can you find an advocate at? Oklahoma Parent Center is up here, oklahomaparentcenter.org, or you can contact me and I can point you in the right direction. But all my information's up on here right now. In fact, oh no, it's not going to let me copy that. Okay. I don't know what happened. Okay. So. All right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. And I know this was rushed and I don't have all the answers, guys. I can only tell you what I've been through so far, but we help families all the time. And I probably didn't answer all of your questions, but feel free to contact me. My information's up here. Email me, call me. We'll work something out. If I don't know the answer, I'll find it for you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Kodey. I have learned so much from this, and I'm sure that all of our participants have too. Please reach out to Kodey or the Persuasive Parenting Center, Oklahoma Parent Center, Oklahoma Family Network. There are resources available for you to help you and your child succeed and have an amazing life. This concludes our meeting. If you have any more questions, drop them. If not, then I will end the recording. Thank you so much.
Thank you.